I think that in the same sense that right-wing Christians in America were convinced that it was in their interest to go overthrow Saddam Hussein because, he was going to give the nukes he didn't have off to the terrorists who weren't friends with him or whatever the line exactly was. I think a very similar dynamics going on with Jews and Israelis. I think that if you look at the position Israel was in, say 3 years and a day ago, they have by far the most sophisticated, most advanced military in the Middle East. They have the support of all the most powerful governments in the world. They have a bunch of atomic weapons. They're in a pretty good. They have now engendered so much hatred around the world that they're probably in the most vulnerable spot they've ever been. They've done it to themselves. So I think in a very similar sense, it's really actually not in Jewish interest, and I think that's kind of bearing out right now across the culture. Like this was terrible. It's the worst thing you could do if you cared about protecting Jews or not stoking up hatred against them. And so I look at it more like even when these guys like Bill Ackman or George Soros or people like that. But yeah, you're pointing to people who are in the club. I mean, George Soros is essentially a wing of the CIA. I was literally just the other day because I was looking up. When I was doing an episode on General Wesley Clark in response to the latest hit piece on me from the Free Press today, or preceding it, I guess. And I was like, I gotta look up Sudan. Because that's the one country on this list that I just haven't read enough about. I've read a little bit about it, but not nearly enough. Which is for people like me and you who read books. Which, by the way, does put you in the top 1% of political commentators already.
Yeah, no joke.
But the thing is, you're just always behind. There's just always 10 books you're supposed to read that you haven't read yet. And you're like, God damn it, you're so aware of what you don't know, And then someone who knows absolutely nothing is like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're like, I know I don't know what I'm talking about. I know, but you know nothing of what you're talking about. But anyway, so I was I literally just Googled it. I was like, so what? I know that they broke off, and I didn't even know who was involved in it. I know the southern part of Sudan broke off, and there was a civil war. There's let me have someone southern. So I just literally Google Sudan secession, civil war, something like that. And the first thing Google gives me is the George Soros Open Society, why Southern Sudan needs their independence. And you're like, oh, okay, here we go. But if you when you look at it, right? And this is true in the Israel lobby itself. It's not all Jews. It is overwhelming large amount of Jews. And the neoconservatives were 80% Jewish. I think there were Catholics and even some Protestants in there. But even the neoconservatives, right? They were essentially all of George W. Bush's men. He had Jews all throughout his administration. They were all neoconservatives. But the boss was George W. Bush. Dick Cheney, I think, really was the boss. Rumsfeld, Condi Rice, Colin Powell. These are all non-Jews. It seems much more to me that there's a big club. There's a lot of Jews in there, and there's non-Jews in there as well, and that they are screwing everybody over. And it just seems to me to be more accurate and precise, and not carry any of the baggage that makes people think you just are animated by racial hatred. And it's just more precise to just be no, it's these guys, it's this network of people. And even when you're looking at something it's difficult, and we are all guilty of this at some point, of assuming the conclusion, of starting the argument with the end result that we have. So even when you look at okay, well, this Jew is pursuing this strategy, or this one is pursuing this strategy, the overwhelming majority of Jews are pursuing the same strategy that most people are pursuing, which is I want to raise my kids. I want to have decent health care. I want to have a decent life. I want to hang out with my buddy. I don't think they're pursuing these grand political strategies. I mean, no more so than anybody is who just they have their disposition to I'm liberal or I'm conservative or I'm this. Certainly I would grant that Jews are probably less likely to go down a path of Jew hatred for obvious reasons. But I think that it's much more there are these group of powerful people. They are, by the way, the entire machinery, I think, is actually, I don't know if I want to say it's more based on business than ideology, but business is a huge, huge factor in all of this, right? It's not as if the Zionists weren't able to gain so much control of the American military machine because simply they tricked everybody or something. It's because it was good for business. You know, and you can watch this. I mean, they went, all the neocons went and they made their independent relationships with the military-industrial complex. Look at all those Bill Kristol think tanks, and you know, who's funding that think tank? Oh, look at that, Lockheed Martin. Ain't that a coincidence?
Right.
And so in the same way that, you know, like there are, say, thinkers like John Rawls or John Maynard Keynes, who are like beloved figures in Washington. But it's not because any of them read the books or care about the argument. It's just that they prescribed more power for Washington, D.C. And so Washington, D.C. is like, you made an excellent point. You know, it's not like anyone there was like, they were reading Hayek or something and then reading, you know, Rawls and going, this guy's arguments are superior. It's just good for business, man.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it, at least.
Well, I don't disagree at all, because that's sort of the nature of institutions. They're self-perpetuating. You know, they'll prescribe themselves bigger budgets and more missions and things. So I totally agree with that. That's the professional managerial class, what they do.
Right.
But where I would push back is saying that, you know, let's say, for example, like Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison is second richest guy in the world. They're buying the media. Him and his son are buying TikTok. They're buying CBS. Who does he put in charge at CBS? Bari Weiss. Bari Weiss was helped by Hazony and Brett Stevens. It's like, that very clearly is a Jewish club. And they're cutting through society. And yeah, they run in other elite circles. And yeah, they have their accomplices that are not Jewish. Even, you know, look at the Trump administration. Trump brokered that deal. He's a Gentile. But he got money from Miriam Adelson. And his grandchildren are Jewish because his son-in-law is Jewish. And it's like, it's almost like that exception doesn't prove the rule. And you're right about the Vulcans, you know, Condi and Bush and all them. They're Gentiles too. But it's like, it seems that society is always being pushed by this organized minority. Because you're right, there are Rawlsian liberals that are white, and there are, you know, evangelical Christians that are white that are neocons. But it just seems like the Jews because by definition they're organized in a way that nobody else is. Like Bush is not organized as a white guy or even very much as a Christian. But you do have like a World Zionist Congress. You do have a World Jewish Congress. You have the, you know, Conference of Major American Jewish Organizations. I don't even think people realize the extent to which Jews are organized in community centers by Chabad, in university with their fraternities, and in business, and in their localities. It's like they're extremely organized. And as far as the average Jew is concerned, yeah, they're not running the banks. I don't think your average Jew is like a spy, but I do think that your average Jew is inherently distrusting of like patriotism and nationalism. It's like Sarah Silverman said when she saw her white boyfriend put a American flagpole on her lawn, she said it reminded her of Hitler. How many Jews is that attitude prevalent? When they saw Trump, they thought the same thing. Fascism. They said it could not happen here. It's sort of that same attitude. And I think, here is what I will concede. I think that by we, I mean me, if my movement wants to have power and really put America first, it means we are going to have to sideline, by definition, Jews that put the Jewish nation first.
Yeah, well, I think and Christians too, for that matter. I mean, like,
I disagree. I think America's
well,
a Christian country.
I'm saying Christians who put Israel first.
Oh,
for that matter,
yeah,
too.
for
So
sure.
I'm saying, which there are plenty of.
Sure.
And look, it's a huge part of this, because you talk about the like kind of organization, but I think that's very true for evangelical Christians who are constantly having preachers, you know, tell them that like this is your duty, is to have this political outlook. There's tens of millions of them in the country, and like, look, you can always say, well, that's the Jews manipulating them, but again, it just seems like this is presuming the conclusion. It's like,
are we not being manipulated though in that way?
Of course. No, I'm not denying that. I'm just saying it's not just Jews at the top of doing the manipulation.
And I agree, but that's where I have to come in as a Christian white American and say we have to disentangle these things and say, and wake up the evangelicals and say, look, this is not, you're American, you're Christian. They are not Christian. They are not American. It is not in our interest. We have to take our own side.
I think that there's the perhaps because you're Christian and I'm Jewish, but when you're talking about evangelical Christians, although not Catholics like yourself, you go, well, we got to wake them up and make them realize that. And I feel the same way about Jews in general. It's like, we got to wake them up and be like, yo, you're not about to be Holocausted, and you don't need to support this in order to avoid one. And that's much tougher to do when everybody on Twitter is saying the Holocaust never happened, but if it did, it was good and it should happen again or something like that. So that would be that. Let's do. I just always completely lose track of time on these things. Let's talk about Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
A little bit. Because there was, me and you both, as I mentioned, have gotten a bunch of heat for not like immediately jumping to these conspiracy theories. Although, like, as I've said the whole time, I'm like, I'm open to it. Like, show me what you got. I do, though, think, and I've talked about this a bit on my show, I know you have on yours as well, I do think that the story of Charlie Kirk, though, and his relationship with Israel is really interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
So aside from the conspiracy stuff, and I guess that my friend Candace, who your dear friend too,
I'm a big fan. Yeah.
She just last night released evidently some screenshots of a group chat where Charlie had said, he was very frustrated with a Jewish donor who I guess had pulled some money from him. And he had said something about like, I'm going to not be able to be a Israel supporter anymore. Certainly doesn't tell you anything pointing to his murder. But it does certainly show you that like, if that's true, and I'm assuming Candace like isn't posting a screenshot that's made up. I think Candace has more integrity than that. So if that's true, man, Josh Hammer and these guys have been being really dishonest about what really happened with Charlie Kirk. And I will tell you this story. I don't know if you've heard this before. I apologize to the fans because I have told them this before. But so my only experience where I debated Josh Hammer twice, I think I was telling you this outside and then we got distracted. But so the second time I debated him is at this Charlie Kirk event. And the whole time, Charlie Kirk was just like, look, I really want to keep this civil and not be a mudslinging thing. And I go, absolutely, no problem. I think I'm very much like you. In that sense, I think we're very similar, that we're both kind of guys who actually really do care about the ideas and the issues. And if you approach us with like, let's debate these, it will 100% of the time be a substantive conversation. However, if you want to be vicious, like we're also okay with playing that game. Like, and you're like, I will be more vicious than you. I mean, maybe not you, but just about everybody else. You're not going to, and like, maybe I should be a little more mature than that at this age, but that is how I am. So I went, sure, no problem. So we go in the back, we're in like the green rooms, me and Charlie and his, I'm blanking on his name, but his guy, who's the guy on his show now, who's kind of like his right-hand man.
Andrew Colvin?
Yes, I believe that was him. So it was the three of us, and we talked for a while, and then Josh Hammer came in. And we're just talking, everybody's just being friendly and talking. We were kind of talking about every issue except Israel, because like we're about to go debate that. So we were talking about immigration and started talking about family stuff at one point, just like everyone having a nice conversation. And Charlie, and there's like, okay, we're going to go have this debate. And I was not sure what I was walking into there. Like it was very, very interesting because like half the crowd might have been like your people. I mean, like it was at a Charlie Kirk event, it was striking that it was like, or I should say my people. But I came out, the first thing Charlie says when I come out onto stage, is he introduces me and he goes, "Ooh, we got a lot of Dave Smith fans here." Like he was kind of surprised that like half the crowd was thrilled to see me there. And then like 20% of them hated my fucking guts, but it was 20% to half. Like it was clearly the majority was, because it's young people, man. And that's where they are right now. But so Josh Hammer goes out there after this, and he has the first opening. And the final thing he says in his opening is that he's disgusted to be sharing a stage with me. And I just thought there was something about that I was like, what a fucking snake you are. If it was the last communication I ever had with Charlie Kirk was me texting him, what a fucking snake that guy was after all that. And then Charlie just said something diplomatic back. He was like, it was aggressive or something like that. But I just thought on like a dude level, and I guess maybe this is part of the reason why me and you always kind of had like a mutual respect and liked each other. There's just something where you're like, who does that?
Yeah.
Like who the fuck does that? Like you're so comfortable being duplicitous that you'd sit down. Like if I was about to go on a show with you right now and do this and be like, I'm disgusted that you're across the table, I wouldn't have had that 20 minutes of nice chit chat with you outside. It would have been like, no, we're doing it like that. So anyway, I say all of that to just say, I don't trust that guy one little bit. I'm curious, what do you make of the new revelations or this dynamic with Charlie Kirk? It's a weird spot for you to be in, being such a like rival and an antagonist of a person, and then they're killed in this horrible way. And so it's a weird spot. But
awkward,
what are your thoughts on this latest?
Well, I agree with how you said it, which is, look, I mean, if someone other than Tyler Robinson killed Charlie Kirk, I'd of course be very interested in that, but I just don't see evidence for that. And people are trying to. It's like anything. In hindsight, you can look at every person's reaction in the crowd and say they're a decoy or an operative, whatever. There's really nothing hard or conclusive that proves anything other than that happened yet. And I'm open to possibilities. What is interesting, but a different conversation, maybe related, is the Israel thing. And I think very clearly, as you and Tucker and Candace and others have, and Max Blumenthal have said, there's ample evidence that at the minimum, there was something dynamic there. He was a pro-Israel guy for many years. Now, seems like that was in flux, and a lot of the evidence has kind of been knocked out. This Bill Ackman retreat, Bill Ackman produced the texts, and Charlie arranged the whole thing. And it was a forum where I'm sure disagreement was expressed, but it showed generally they were still aligned. More interesting was his interview with Megyn Kelly, where clearly he platformed Tucker and you, and it seemed that supporting Israel was in contention, which they hate that that's even on the table, because it matters how you set the table. It doesn't necessarily even matter what your position is, but they don't want that to be up for debate. Do we support Israel? Not a question they want people to ask.
Well, especially when you're losing the debate. That doesn't help either.
Yeah, especially when you get booed and killed in the debate. They don't like that either. And so even that, they were really pushing back on Charlie, threatening. I guess the new revelation is they took the money. They took the $2 million. It's a pretty big organization, but that's not a negligible chunk of change for Charlie and Turning Point USA. And he goes in the group chat, and assuming, like you said, that it's authentic, that is, I think, the most stark thing we've heard from him on the record, where he says, I have to leave the Israel camp. And I would say that's even different than what he said on Megyn Kelly. Because on Megyn Kelly, he said, oh, you're going to call me an anti-Semite? He sort of stopped himself. He said, well, you're going to lose me. That's what he was going towards.
Yeah,
you're not going to lose me. He goes, but I'm going to be deflated. In that text, he says, I'm out. And I would characterize that as I was his rival, and I'm very cynical about him. He was kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. He was really in the middle because, like you said, it's young people. They are Israel critical, and he had to go and defend the bullshit to them at the campus, in the arena, in the pit. So it's easy for them in the ivory tower to say, yeah, we love Israel still. He's actually having to get the shit, and 100 Groypers on the line saying, why do you still love Israel? And I think that he recognized it became a liability and started to try and accommodate everybody, Tucker and the other side, Candace and the other side, the Groypers, so to speak, or the Dave Smith people and the other side. And the other side wasn't having it. They said, you better get the fucking line or we're pulling the plug. And I think he defiantly said, I will not be bullied. I thought it would have been interesting to see where that would have went, but sadly we'll never know.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I've always, I kind of took what he was saying in that thread like a little differently than I guess some people did. I always thought the dynamic with Charlie Kirk was kind of that it was like, look, he's the guy who has to keep the young people on board. And he's, by definition, he has to be a big tent guy.
Yes.
Because he's trying to win. He's in a different game than me and you are in.
Yes.
It's a whole different thing to be like we're in the business of telling the truth as we see it. We're in the business of breaking down the ideas and how we view them. And as you said, at times, even like stretching the Overton window and maybe even accepting that, like, I'm going to be speaking to the remnant here. I'm going to be speaking to one group of people, but hopefully this group will move the broader conversation. A very different thing to be doing a get out the vote campaign. You need everybody involved. And I think that I think Josh Hammer is not lying when he says he was doing everything to keep you out. That was the goal, is like, we are going to cut the line here. But just with the new dynamics of where politics is now in this real, like a revolution in media that me and you have both been living through and being, active participants in, it was like, okay, but you're big enough at this point that, like, okay, cutting Nick Fuentes out and then everything else is a big tent. Okay, you maybe could pull that off. But you're asking Tucker and Megyn Kelly too. Right. And I think Charlie just realized the tent now is like, there's no way this works. And so I almost took it when he was saying, I have to do this as going, I'm going to have no other choice to keep turning. And of course, this is the rock and the hard place, right? Because you couldn't be anti-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points, but also you couldn't be pro-Israel and run an organization like Turning Points anymore, because you need the kids and you need the donors. And so there's this, and I think that, like it did seem that essentially like his calculation, it seems to me, I'm speculating a little bit, but that his calculation was like, okay, well, I'll have Tucker and I'll let Dave do this debate. And then I can be seen as like, hey, look, I'm facilitating the conversation. I'll do all this. But that was way too far for the back. They were like, yo, what are you kidding me? Like, I mean, these are the people who like, they thought when Mom Donnie, say a million things about the guy, he's probably going to be very bad for this city that we're currently in right now, and also is just like very cringy and awful in a lot of ways. But the fact that he said, why this is coming up in a New York City mayoral debate, do you favor a one-state solution or a two-state solution? What the hell does this have to do with New York City? But he goes, I favor one state with equal rights for all. And they went, Adolf Hitler. Because you fucking nuts. Like, that was supposed to be the gotcha. Like, in what world is the bad guy the guy who's going, I think everyone should have equal rights? It's just, but so to them, there is no distinction between any of us. You know what I mean? Like, it's all kind of the same thing. And yeah, I don't know. It is very interesting because there's something... there's something revealing about the fact that even, say, people like Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk will get this same type of treatment when they step out of line.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And people are, I think, misreading it a little bit. Like he was this... It's such an important point you made that we do something different, because when we go on our shows, we say, I think, I feel. He didn't really have that luxury.
Right.
Because he was not in the business actually of telling it like he sees it. He was in the business of, it was more political, getting everybody to vote, keeping everybody happy, pushing directionally towards the right. And so when people say he was going to be this rebel, he had this epiphany, he just had to get it out, I don't think that's it. I think, like you said, he was put in an impossible situation because the underlying reality had changed. The underlying political dynamic, the right-wing youth are what they are, and the donors are what they are. And as a matter of fact, I don't think he left Israel. I think Israel left him. And that's sort of what the text said. He said, they leave me with no choice.
Yeah.
After they pulled the money, they said, we cannot tolerate, so we're taking the money. And he said, well, I'm not going to be held hostage by your money. I have to side with the ever-growing tent of people that are either indifferent or critical or anti or whatever. And so that is how I read it. And I agree. I mean, to the broader point, even the earlier conversation, Israel is in a lot of trouble, it seems. I was sort of skeptical, but this is very much in flux because it is the right-wing youth. It's Tucker, it's Megyn Kelly, it's Charlie Kirk, it's France, it's Portugal, it's UK, it's Canada, it's like most of America. And, I guess the question is what's on the other side of it? If they win, well, they will have unprecedented power. With Iran out of the picture, they'll be an enormously powerful, maybe the regional power in the Middle East. If they lose, or if they don't get everything they want, then they might be in more peril than ever before. And I guess the remaining thing is kind of where it goes from here with Trump, because it's so weird how everything, in a sense, I don't believe that they killed Charlie Kirk, and yet his death, by revealing what it did, is going to play a big role in this conversation. Because like you said, it shows that the right wing is literally breaking up over this. Like this issue is forcing this contradiction, and that contradiction is splitting the right, which is the ruling party, in the middle of the UN meeting, in the middle of the peace deal that's about to blow up. It's like, I think when all is said and done, we look at this 2-year period, it will contribit to that larger conversation. And then, where's Trump going to go with this?
Yeah.
Because he's the decider.
Well, that's right. And I thought it was so interesting, like the 12-day war, as it's been dubbed, which, we seem to be at halftime of. But there's, like that was such an interesting dynamic because I've just never seen anything like that in politics before. And I've been paying attention to politics for almost 20 years now. And I've read a lot about, before that time that I was paying attention. And like, it would be on the level of like, if Barack Obama launched a war and Rachel Maddow and you know what I mean? All that were like, hell no, we are not supporting this. Or George W. Bush and Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity were both like, screw that. And you just never really seen a dynamic like that before, where what can you do here? You're actually kind of limited in your options. And so, yeah, I mean, it's there's just so much of this stuff is like we're in a new experiment right now. We've never really had this level of uncontrolled, media. And I just do think that support for the Israeli government, and not the existence of an Israeli government, but support for the current Israeli government and what they do, was totally dependent on a controlled media environment. It simply can't survive in an uncontrolled media environment. And I do think that, these young people, you're talking to them, none of them get their news from the corporate media anymore. They are all listening to our shows. And it's almost like no matter what corner of, say, the internet media that you're in, you've just seen the debates have happened so many times. Like Piers Morgan has hosted so many of these debates. I did one on Joe Rogan. There's been on Lex Friedman. I saw you debated Dinesh D'Souza on that, and every single time, it's almost always the exact same thing. Yes. I mean, like I watched your I'd seen clips of it, but I watched the full thing earlier today, and I was just such a one side. Like, I mean, and by the way, Dinesh, his stock went up in my book just from like the way he handled it. Yes. I thought like I appreciated that, but like on the substance of it, it's not even fair, man. Like, it's not like you're like, one of these times I should have to switch and argue your side because it's just too ridiculous. Like, it's so fucking indefensible. And you got to sit here and pretend like it's just, I'm sorry, you're not going to. And so we're just left in a situation now where, the young people they've all woken up to this shit, and there's really no putting it away after that.
Yeah, and what's sort of unnerving is like, if they can't put it back in the bottle, which, they're going to try, and they are trying. That's what this TikTok and CBS, and even, they're not even taking it at CBS. Like, everybody knows what that is. I saw all the presenters on like 60 Minutes were leaking to the press how much they hate Bari Weiss, and, they don't want to go along with all this. It's like, it becomes almost scary because Netanyahu's been in power for almost 2 decades. And in a sense, it's like, this is sort of a modern situation. The war on terror, the Middle East, Netanyahu, the ascendancy of Likud, the neocons. This is like the past 25, 30 years. And it seems to sort of be sunsetting. Like Netanyahu, if this war ends, for better, for worse, he's going to be out. And he will not, whoever his successor is, will not be able to keep the coalition together as well as he did. So maybe their influence diminishes there. The media environment is not centralized anymore, so they don't influence that either. In the last legs of whatever this period can be called, that this go for broke moment, what scares me is how desperate they're going to get. Yeah. And I think that's where maybe it makes sense they killed Charlie Kirk, because there's some recognition they are that desperate. Like, that is a desperate hour for them when they're losing absolutely everybody, isolated. They're not winning the debates. They can't win it with the soft power, censorship, suppression, the rest of it. Do they then resort to total chaos, crisis, these kinds of operations? That, because it's sort of like the emperor has no clothes. It's, like you said, in our lifetimes, we've never seen something like this. Can they lose? Will they tolerate losing? What does that actually look like? And I think that's going to be resolved in the next 6 months. So it's going to be kind of freaky.
Yeah, it's like the example I use is that they say when a woman in an abusive relationship tries to leave the husband, that's the most dangerous time. That's when he might kill you, is when you try to leave. Even though it's the right thing to do, it's like that is the most dangerous time. And so I think it's something we should all be kind of aware of is how do you manage that situation exactly? And, you always kind of want to, even in these really awful situations, you want to kind of leave the door open in a way. Like, you have to find a way for Netanyahu to be able to declare victory or whatever and say, save face to stop kind of doing what he's doing. But it is, look, it's like you said, there's just no... I remember thinking this when they were really trying to cancel Rogan during the COVID stuff. because he was like heroically telling the truth about it. And I remember even thinking, you're like, so what? Let's say this works. You get Joe. What do you think? All his listeners are going back to Don Lemon? Like, whether they take you out, they take me out, whatever. Do you think all the people we talk to, or what's their next step? Like, it's not like they're going back into the Matrix or whatever. Like, that's not happening. And it is, I think, because I want to talk about Trump a little bit too, and J.D. Vance. I'd like to talk about the kind of future of the Republicans a bit, but it is just this past weekend, we lived through like a real interesting little moment where Donald Trump, in one more example where he's clearly frustrated with Netanyahu, and goes and finally says it, after all this time, finally says Israel must stop bombing Gaza immediately. I don't know. I know they're claiming, because I was like reading up the latest of this stuff. Like Dave DeCamp is always the best guy to read for what the latest, news on the ground is. And they're claiming they've stopped some of the bombings, but like they did still, there was a lot of offensives going on over the weekend. They killed like something like 70 Palestinians on Saturday and then 40 on Sunday or something like that. And so you're like, okay. But I think I was saying this on my last episode. I think in a way, the more revealing thing is that, first of all, we likely assume Israel's just going to continue doing what they're doing. But even forget that. We know for a fact that even if they did, nothing would change. Even if Donald Trump says, you must stop doing this now, nothing will change if they continue to do it. And that, to me, is so obviously indefensible, that like you have a country who is propping up another country, and that this country's commander-in-chief has zero influence over telling them to stop what they're doing. They don't even feel, there was, I'm blanking on who it was, but it was someone high up in the government who said, well, we have no ceasefire in place. Essentially meaning, we could keep doing this. We have not made a deal yet. And it's like, yeah, but the president of the United States told you to stop, and you're dependent on him. So stop. So that's an outrage. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Moinkbox. I love Moink. Moink is a great company doing a great service for Americans. They're not just delivering delicious meat to your doorstep, but they're also keeping family farms going. The Moink business is simple, okay? Moink meat comes from animals raised outdoors where a pig is free to be a pig. Their farmers are given an honest day's pay for an honest day's work, and they deliver meat straight to your doorstep at prices you can actually afford. Born, raised, harvested right here in the United States of America. And I can personally tell you their meat is delicious. I'm always looking for like the family farm where you can buy your own meat there, because I just don't trust the stuff in supermarkets. So I was really into Moink as a concept. I've had several different pieces of meat from them. They're absolutely excellent. I highly recommend them. Plus, you can support American family farms when you join the Moink movement, and join over at moinkbox.com/POTP right now, and you get free bacon for a year. So that's 1 year of the best bacon you'll ever taste, but for a limited time only, and only when you sign up at moinkbox.com/POTP. That's MOINKBOX.com/POTP. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Monetary Metals, an amazing company that is revolutionizing the way you invest in gold and silver. They have been paying interest in silver and gold for over 8 years, helping you grow your wealth in real, tangible assets. Finally, there's a true alternative to saving in dollars, a yield on gold and silver with Monetary Metals. Look, here's the deal. A lot of you guys own precious metals. If you're owning precious metals, you're probably either keeping them physically at home, in which case they're just collecting dust, or you're having them professionally stored, in which case you're paying fees on your precious metals. But with Monetary Metals, you own precious metals that work for you. They generate interest paid in additional ounces. So this is just a no-brainer for people who own precious metals. This is the best way to do it. Go check them out at monetary-metals.com. That's monetary-metals.com. All right, let's get back into the show. More broadly speaking, so I find this to be kind of interesting. So me and you are actually opposite in terms of, I think you voted for Trump in 16 and 20,
Yes.
not in 24. I didn't in 16 and 20, but did in
Really?
24. Although I think we have a lot of the same critiques of him. We kind of saw that different. But how do you, I think at this point, I think you've been very, what's the word I'm looking for? I think you've been very hampered about your criticism of Donald Trump. It seems to me like that's the appropriate thing to do now. I mean, I think there were like a few things where, you know, I felt like when Donald Trump first got in, or right after the election was won, I tried to lead this like no Pompeo thing of like being like no Pompeo, because that was like he had spoken at the last Trump rally, and so I was talking to like Tucker and like all these other guys. I was like, dude, we should all go all in on this. Like Pompeo and Haley and all these awful people came out, and then he signed that letter saying Pompeo and Haley won't be in it, and then I was like, okay, not enough. All the neocons got to be kept out now, you know? And then Donald Trump Jr. like quote tweeted me and was like, 100%, I'm on it, blah, blah, blah. And there was a moment there where I was like, fucking maybe, you know, like I actually maybe want to believe. I mean, and part of it, and I know, I mean, I'm a libertarian. So like, I know that I've been through this, but I know all the talking points and how nothing ever changes. There's no government solutions and blah, blah, all this. But I was like, you know what? They did try to arrest this guy. They did try to do more than arrest this guy. Maybe again, I'm not trying to jump to a web, but there were some things about that really just don't add up. I'm still very, skeptical of the official story on that. But it's like maybe there's actually something. But after continuing to back Israel, the Epstein thing was a big one. The Iran thing was like a death blow. It was like, and at this point, it's not like there's another election coming up. We already kind of know what the Trump thing is. We've gotten some small wins. The border control is a big win. I shouldn't say that. That's not a small thing. He really did turn that around. He deserves credit for that. But everything else, Nick, everything else has just been a disaster. And so I don't know. I think we're in a similar place where it's like, no, fuck this.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't tell me that it's like we have to just blindly support this while our country's still falling apart.
Yeah, I mean, there's just no argument anymore. In 2024.
I'm sorry, one of you guys just grab me a water? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. In 2024, there was at least this argument to be made that maybe it would be different this time. And like you said, you articulated the reasons why. They tried to kill him, they impeached him, they charged him. So the question was, is it going to be different this time? Did he learn? Is there going to be better people? And I get that. So I didn't begrudge people that did vote for him, but there were signs. Nikki Haley endorsed him, and he said we were going to go to war with Iran, basically. He said they were going to bring in the H-1Bs and all this stuff. And, and then they appointed the cabinet within 3 weeks. Rubio for Secretary of State. And I guess the interesting thing I have to say beyond what is obvious, which is that it's kind of crashing and burning, is I look at a guy like Kurt Mills, Kurt Mills at AmCon, and, he seems like he's a good guy. Like, he's 100% on board, maybe more with you than me, but, he knows relevant facts. And I remember watching him during the negotiation between Trump and, or I should say, Witkoff and Araghchi or whoever it was on the Iranian side. And he would go on Steve Bannon every week and say, any day now, they're going to make a deal and, Netanyahu's going to be put in his place. And I'm thinking, have you ever seen anything in history? It never goes that way. Yeah. And it never goes that way because, like you said before, it's sort of axiomatic. Trump is not willing to shut them down. He's just not willing to resist them or go there. He doesn't care enough or whatever the reason is. It's hard to know what's in his heart or in his mind. He won't do it. And then, I think it was 3 days before we went to war, he goes, it's not on radar that Trump is going to attack Iran. That's not on radar. It's like, buddy, read the tea leaves. Of course he's going to go and bomb Iran. So, and I kind of get where you're coming from about the Pompeo. I was even skeptical about the Pompeo thing because I said they got a list of these people they're going to put in. And that's why I'm a big believer in this. It's not even, people say, are you going to vote for a Democrat? We got to think beyond that. To me, it's just about rejection. They set the table, and you can't really choose what's on the table, but you could choose whether to eat or not, whether you're going to play the game. And so my bigger idea is just reject. And I like what you said. It encapsulates it. It's bullshit. no, thank you. You know, you're promising stuff, you know you're not going to deliver. When you put the stuff out there, the big beautiful bill, $150 billion for border enforcement, they're not deporting even 1,000 people a day, like it's nothing. And so I just look at these guys like Dan Caldwell crying on Tucker, at Kurt Mills, all that kind of stuff, people saying, we're going to hold their feet to the fire, we're going to pressure them. And I'm like, aren't you tired? We did that already. We did that in the first term. Because I was kind of in that place in the first term where it's like, we're going to control the personnel, we're going to do this. And I knew people in the admin, I knew people on the campaign that didn't get hired because they were on the campaign, because the people in the admin were from the Rubio campaign or the Bush campaign. And it's like, you know, we just need something that at the end of the day is what we want, not a compromise. I know it's not how politics works, but we just need something that is promising and intends on delivering what we really care about. And Trump was never that, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's you know, it's a shame in a way. Is a friend of mine, Scott Horton, always says the country needed Ron Paul and we got Donald Trump, which is, you know, kind of how I see it. Maybe you would say more like Pat Buchanan or someone like that. But, you know, I think both of us would take either of those options if they were on the table. But it is, you know, and I thought the Epstein one was a particular, you know, it's interesting how much that really was devastating for Donald Trump. And it was more than just the Epstein story. I think it was like what that symbolized, that, you know, that it was like right at the heart of his political raison d'etre, which was draining the swamp.
Right.
And it was like, come on, man, what's a better example of the swamp than this? Oh, we won't touch that? Okay. All right, then. So I guess we know how serious we are about this. And I got to say, I mean, I see nothing promising about J.D. Vance. I think my view of it seems to be that I do think that he's like maybe kind of sympathetic to, like, you know, my foreign policy views. And I think that he does seem to err more on that side, but I just don't think he has anywhere near the stones to like stand up to anyone. I think he wants to be president more than he wants to care about that. And that right there is that's the deal breaker then. Okay, then. So you're not, and again, to your point, I think, which I would just maybe modify, and I think you probably agree with this too. It's like, I'm not even against compromise. But there's got to be a compromise.
Yes,
there's got to be like a reasonable compromise. Like
Yes.
I am willing to compromise on a few things, but the compromise can't be I have to bend over and grab my ankles. Like that's not not a reasonable compromise that I'm trying to sign up to. So it's like I just don't, and I wonder, because, you know, like there's always two ways to look at this. And like the conventional political thinking, the Charlie Kirk thinking would be like, well, any dissension here only helps the Democrats, right? So if we're not all rallying around them, then we get the Democrats who are the worst, you know, biggest threat. But of course, I think our rejoinder to that would be that, like, well, no, not releasing the Epstein files is what gives and when I say file, you know, just not getting to the bottom of it. That's what gives them that. And what is J.D. Vance going to run on? I mean, how is he going to capture that energy that Donald Trump had? We're furious with this system. The system is so corrupt and so dishonest and so such a betrayal to every American that we want someone to go in there and be a wrecking ball against them. How is J.D. Vance possibly going to capture that energy?
Right.
When there's nobody's believing it anymore.
Well, and with Trump, I feel like a lot of people just forgot really what he was. There were a lot, because I feel like not a lot of people actually voted for him in 2016 that are around now. Yeah. And you and I know, because we both, I mean, you're around longer than me, but we were both around then. And I feel like there's a lot of young people and maybe even like big supporters of Trump now that weren't really with him in 16. And so what I'm trying to say is, for a lot of people to have amnesia, they think that he's a Republican, he's a conservative, like, because that's really what he's become. That is what he was in 20. That's what he was in 24. He's against the radical left. He's against the Democrats. But in 16, he started out fighting the Republican establishment. And he really ran as like an independent. Yeah. And I always go back to the proposition of Trump. This is my basis for not voting for him last year, which is not, I'm better than the Democrats, which is the minimum. Yeah. You're a Republican. Oh, he's better than Kamala. Okay, isn't that a given? Like, shouldn't you be? It's not that he's a conservative or anything like that. He said, the system is rigged and it's broken. I will break it because I'm rich. I'm so rich, I don't need to take their money. And if I don't have to take their money, I can actually deliver real change because I don't have to worry about upsetting them. That, in a nutshell, was the premise. And that was his appeal. He would go up on the stage and, like, you watch this now and you're like, where's this guy? That famous clip where he goes, they're booing him, and he goes, that's all donors in the audience.
So
I don't
great.
want their money. I don't need their money. And everyone resonated right, left, and center, said, yeah, fuck the system. That's true. They're bought off. That's why nothing ever changes. He's rich. They can't buy him. That was the idea. Obviously wasn't true. Then now in 24, when he got 200 billion or 200 million from Tim Mellon and from Elon Musk and Ken Griffin and Mark Andreessen, the usual suspects. And with J.D. Vance, like you said, it's just even worse. It's disgusting that anyone's even considering voting for him, to me, because it's like, at least Trump had kind of a claim to be that guy because he was this like bombastic billionaire from the private sector. Vance is like your prototypical political artifact, like a creation in a lab, like fake career, fake name, fake book, patrons in the CIA, like he's a nerd. He's not even really that conservative, you know, the fake conversion. Maybe he's a real convert, but it seems too convenient. Like he's everything that Trump ran against. He's like Jeb Bush. He was calling Trump a Nazi and voted for McMullen, and it was a never Trumper. So, and I'm just unloading my case against him, but it's like they could not be more different. So to your point, how are you going to sell that? I don't know how any MAGA person is buying it, but I think they will.
And there's another thing where, like, you know, the vice presidency, you know, the role, it's an interesting job because there's really not a job. Exactly. But it makes you kind of like, oh, you're the next in line. But if you just remove that for a second, who would have ever thought J.D. Vance could carry a national election? J.D. Vance is not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the most famous human being who's ever lived, who's bombastic and charismatic and just like owns a room like no other. Like really is like as a unique gift in this way. Unfortunately, all of these gifts are only for like marketing and promotion and running for that. It's not like he has no governing, you know, ability at all. But like J.D. Vance doesn't have that. He doesn't have that factor, the Hitler aura, as you would describe it. You know what I mean? But like he just, and so it's you're just looking at this and you go, so look, if you're telling me that like the radical left Democrats are the real threat, which granted they are, it's like it seems like we're staring at them having a chance. Now, I guess the only thing, and again, this is an interesting dynamic, one that I've never really seen before in my lifetime, is where you see when Donald Trump's support like plummets, it doesn't seem to give any boost to the Democrats who are still kind of just like in the tank. And I think part of that is just because they failed so miserably over the last few years. But I do think, like, to your broader point, and I'm not even like saying 100% one way or the other, but it's something that like I think people who are, you know, dissidents, broadly speaking, of this system and are you know, in opposition to the current regime need to think about a lot. Because yeah, like if our vote isn't a given, our support isn't a given, then it has to be worked for, you know? And also that things aren't always so clear, you know, like you could say Kamala Harris would have been worse than Donald Trump. Now in this particular example, just on the border security, probably we're better off, all things considered, with Donald Trump. But at the same time, in a lot of ways, I think you could argue for right-wing America, it was better that Joe Biden won the 2020 election.
Yes.
Like things improved in a way that you really could not have imagined them improving under Donald Trump. And I mean, culturally speaking, like even after Donald Trump won in 2016, the culture didn't swing to the right. The culture swung even further to the left. The culture only started swinging back to the right when Joe Biden was in. It actually was easier when there was a brain dead president who represented the Democratic Party. And we had the wins, you know, in Twitter and the stuff I was talking about with like Target and Bud Light and all this stuff. And so like, it's just not so, you know, it's not always so obvious.
Yeah.
You know, as white men can't jump quote. Sometimes when you win, you actually lose. And sometimes when you lose, you actually win. And so I just think that, I would hope, like, I hope maybe like Thomas Massey will run in primary Hammer. I would at least hope that there's something that kind of like gets the conversation over like, no, actually, how about we expect you to be this? We expect you to actually be good. And nothing crazy. I'm not like even asking for, this is why I corrected you on the no compromise. Like I'll compromise, okay?
Yes.
But like, don't get us in another stupid war. Like, you know, make policy dictated off what's best for America. We have to do something about this debt problem. Like we have to at least attempt to tackle it because we're drowning in it. And the answer can't just be continue to debase the currency because it's destroying our country. It's like, and don't have a wide open border. Like I'm just like so few that like if you could just be good on these few things, I'd be like, okay, I'll hold my nose over the rest. But there's got to be some way. And especially now with the new media landscape, with the amount of influence that me and you have right now, I don't know, we've got some opportunities to say like, hey, no, we're not just going to go along with this. We ought to plant a flag at like one reasonable point and go, we're not bending on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we need to throw our weight around, and we'll have a much better opportunity to do that because in 28, it's an open field on both sides. In 2016, 2024, Trump was like the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room, immovable. Like you, me, all of us put together, like no one was going to knock him off that trajectory, which is why maybe it was naive for me to like withhold the vote outside of like reasons in principle or for rhetoric. But in 28, we can shape the race because, like you said, I don't think Vance is a shoo-in at all. He's not a national figure. Very good chance he goes the way of DeSantis, where it's a failure to launch, it's a crash and burn situation. And then it's wide open. And I would say that, people say that I'm like a Democrat or like I wanted Kamala to win. And it's like, you think I don't know that Trump is better than Kamala. Everyone knows that. But I love what you said about these like knock-on second-order effects because you're 100% right. Biden winning and like Trump getting banned from YouTube and all that, that's probably why Elon bought Twitter. Like that maybe doesn't happen in a universe where Trump won the 2020 election and all the other downstream effects that took place. Trump being president now is sweeter than it would have been from 20 to 24. And you could have never predicted that, like you said, that Biden winning would force the pendulum to swing in the other direction. I think there was something true about, Trump and Kamala in 24. If Kamala inherited the war in Gaza and the Ukraine war, would we get something insanely radical in 28, like a real reset? Maybe. You can never know. What I would say, though, about 28, and this is maybe new, is like when you look at what Trump is doing, he's creating a lot of tension right now. The ICE raids, the militarization of law enforcement, the war everywhere in Venezuela, Ukraine, Iran, the advance of AI and technology. It's like, if a Democrat wins in 29, I'm moving to another country because whoever comes into power from the left is going to want blood because they're going to want vengeance for all. If they regroup, that's sort of presumptuous. If they regroup and reorganize, they're going to kill us because, like in Chicago, I live right by where this is happening. They set up this detention facility. They're rounding people up, putting hype edits of it on Twitter. It's pissing liberals off. Liberals are going to the place, protesting. The cops are beating the shit out of them and laughing and taunting them. More protesters come. Now they're ramming cars into ICE cars. The cops are shooting them. Now they're bringing in DHS. It's like, we've gone so far up this escalation ladder in like 3 months. And what I fear is that Trump is not going to finish the job. He's not going to salt the earth and destroy Antifa. So all he's doing is pissing these people off. And that means the violence is going to get worse. They're going to organize. We're going to get like Mamdani for president in 28 or, something along that vein. And that's why I think it's really important that like a Republican does win, but it just can't be Vance. So like that's kind of how I'm thinking about it because they're really barking up the wrong tree, in my opinion. They're signing checks they can't cash.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't entirely close the door on Vance. I'm just like, he's got to show me something. Yeah. I got to see something that makes me go like, okay, I can get on board with this at least, which I just haven't seen yet. And I do worry about that a lot. I think it's something that, like, you should pay attention if you think about, say, like kind of the way the culture shifted over the last few years, which really is hard to like overstate how crazy it is, dude. Like me and you talked 5 years ago. We were living in a different world when me and you talked 5 years ago. It's not that long, you know? And there's and you could obviously see right now, like looking at where the culture is, you're like, oh, the woke progressives really overplayed their hand in a lot of ways, right? And then there's a lesson in there to be learned that like things can change very quickly. And I do worry about that. You know, you worry about like how far the Democrats went last time they were in power and what they might do again. It's also important to know that there were like a couple, for as much as I always say, like the American system is pretty broken and the Constitution is pretty destroyed, but there still are some things. And I think people don't appreciate enough the fact that the two major ones that got shut down. Number one was the OSHA vax mandate. Joe Biden had legislated that every company with 100 or more employees must fire anyone who doesn't get this vaccine. This would have been a huge event and massive control of government, you know, particularly, you know, okay, not explicitly targeting right-wingers, but who the hell wasn't getting the vax, you know? And then the other one was the Ministry of Truth, which ended up getting shut down. Now, both of these ended up getting struck down, but man, might we be living in a different world had they gone through. And so who knows what they would try to do again. Also, as you talked about before, which is like kind of a broader theme, is that there is this, you know, Netanyahu's snapback about controlling the media and how he was just openly bragging. I really couldn't believe he was openly bragging. I said on the show, I said, I think this video is supposed to be a secret recording where he's talking in Hebrew. Like, is he actually just on camera saying this in English? Really? But so they're talking. But I do wonder, and I wonder how you think about this, because and this is something that concerns me, particularly about you and the Groypers, and more broadly, just kind of the Twitter culture or what's on social media. It does seem to me like I'm slow motion, almost like watching this movie play out, where it's like it would have seemed impossible 5 years ago. You know, 5 years ago, or I guess 6 years ago, the second time you were on the podcast, you had just been kicked off YouTube. It was just ramping up that like, hey, you simply can't do these things on YouTube. Even like I'm going to put this up on YouTube. I guess we'll test it. We'll test where they're at now. But I just see you're doing other interviews that are up there. I figured, why not? I think it's okay. We're in a, like, you can say things on Twitter now that you couldn't have dreamed of saying. But now that the censorship regime has been rolled back and like Nazi shit is just flooding in, it does seem to me like, oh man, this is like setting up the pretext. It's setting up the pretext for like, hey, you guys wanted to have freedom of speech? Well, here's what it actually looks like. Now can we all agree that this must be shut down? And like, I'm not saying I know that's going to happen, but it's a real concern of mine. And I wonder what you think about all that.
I totally agree. And the first time that kind of was clocking to me was when I think it was on Fresh and Fit. And I love Myron, and I like Fresh too. But it was on their show where I think some like ghetto black woman said like, fuck F the Jews and we love it. And it went like super viral. And like,
yeah, I think I saw this clip.
Usual Suspects seized up on that. And it's like, and I didn't say anything to him privately, but you could see where that's going to go in very short order, where there's no shortage of stuff like that you can find, you know, that certain people are putting out there on a daily basis. And it's not measured. It's not nuanced. There's no point. It's just vulgar. It's vulgar. It is hateful. It definitely probably crosses a line. It doesn't like serve the conversation. Like, it's one thing to say Jewish identity, blah, blah, blah. It's another to say F these people. Like, that's different. And I 100% believe there's going to be another censorship push, and they're going to use shit like that to justify it. So that's why I've really tried, and I'm not the most disciplined person, but I've really been trying this year to be more restrained and measured. And that, you know, and the audience, they perceive everything as cucking. If you're not sprinting towards the most vulgar, extreme, fanatical, they say that you got the call. But it's so important because there is a window of opportunity here. And you and I have been around long enough to recognize that, because you're right. It was a different country in 2015, completely different country. And we don't want to squander that. But then again, you wonder how much of it is even in our control. Will they do it anyway?
No, I think that's right.
We should control what we can control.
No, I think that's right. And I think that, you know, it's something for us to even, you know, always keep in mind too, because it's hard. Like when you start growing, I know you've, I'm sure, experienced this, right? But it's like like when you have a show and it's getting like 10,000 views a show, you can kind of know your audience. You're like, I know what my audience thinks. When you're getting like 500,000, you know, views in a show, it's like if 50,000 people are furious at you, it's like the whole lot. But actually, no, that's not the whole lot. There's a much bigger audience. And like, even as you've said, as you've been trying to, not moderate isn't the word, but like just be more careful or just be more mature, I guess, which is natural for all of us. I mean, I'm still a big child in a lot of ways. But you kind of realize that it's like, well, as you're doing that, actually your audience is growing. It's not like you're losing your audience. It's not like they're abandoning you. I do just think that there is, you know, like even what you were saying with that, it goes, the problem with, you know, because who the hell cares what some ghetto black chick says on Myron's show, you know? And I like Myron. I've done his show before, but who cares what one of these fucking chicks says on there? But the reason to care is because that is the type of thing that will convince normal, reasonable people that, yeah, you know what? In fact, you're right. This is too fucking insane. Like they're praising Adolf Hitler. Like this is, and so you just like, I don't know, like in the same like vein of these second and third order effects, it's like I just think people, you want to try to encourage people to be smart. You're right, we can't control what our audience says, and me and you have experienced that in the last couple weeks. A very clear demonstration of that, and that's good. Our audience shouldn't just be taking our orders or anything, but we should exert influence where we can and go like, hey, think about this. Just like be smart and think about what you're setting up here, because of course, like there's no question that they're thinking about plugging up this hole. Now, what they're going to be able to do about it, who knows? You know, it does feel to me like maybe this thing's gotten away from them, but it's not like they don't have a few tricks up their sleeves. And so we should. I mean, I think we should just think about these things and what the response to it might be, because they're certainly planning. They're very aware of this. You know, that's one of the things that was interesting about Netanyahu's meeting there. It was so interesting that, I mean, I know you must have just been cackling, laughing like I was at this, but the fact that Netanyahu had to deny that he had Charlie Kirk murdered multiple times is like they're aware that things are different. You know what I mean? Like it really is just so hard to imagine. Maybe because I'm a little older, it's like even more hard for me to imagine, because it's just like, yo, this is so unthinkable. It's so unthinkable when I was younger that this would be the case today. But it is, and they've got their eye on this as well. So we're, like you said, we have an opportunity that feels almost like a trap.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, like it just like has that feeling like you're like, wait a minute, this whole thing has been lifted and we're all cool now. It's like, wait, we all agree it's retarded to trans kids? Everyone agrees. Okay. That's kind of interesting. But at the same time, it does feel like, okay, the second act is coming, or the next act is coming, and I worry about what that's going to be. Yeah,
I totally agree. You're waiting for the next shoe to drop, you know, because we've experienced this like suffocating political control that seems like they almost know every permutation of how things are going to end up. And now it's like, so Mark Zuckerberg decided free speech is good now? Like, I don't believe that. I don't believe that there is an ulterior motive. And I think that I'm always just in favor of doing the thing that's unpredictable. Because if to the extent that they have power, it's because they can predict what will happen next or how we'll behave. And so that's why I try to just surprise people and do the thing they're not expecting me to do. Like if they bring me back on Twitter and maybe there's an angle, it's because they're expecting me to be what they think I am, which is a troll or a hater or whatever. So maybe walk it back or be restrained or, you know. And I think that we really need to be intentional and cautious. Like after Charlie died, I called up a lot of people that I know that are like influencers. And I was like, we just really need to be careful to not step into a trap, because it seems like whenever there's a crisis, and you never think it's going to happen, but when there's a crisis, you get kind of riled up and you act in ways that are not smart, you know, and by you, I mean anyone does, me, you, anyone, because emotions are high. Rationality goes out the window, and it's easy to forget all the hard-fought lessons we've learned over the years that have, you know, produced bad results for us. So, you know, with all the violence, chaos, the uncertainty, unprecedented nature of where we are, we just have to be extremely cautious, vigilant, intentional about what we're doing, what we're saying. It just can't be sloppy, you know, because if we're sloppy, the thing about Netanyahu and them is they are really smart. And they are You think they don't know? They know. Like you said, they know astutely. Even to the extent that Matt Walsh says, let them kill each other. That's a brilliant innovation because they knew the pro-Israel thing was losing. And you think they're just going to keep pressing that button until it doesn't work anymore. No, they switched up quick and said, we can't get him to support. We'll get him to say this line about, well, we don't want Muslims here. They reinvent all the time. So the game is not over. That's what people need to keep in mind. You run through the finish line, you run through first base. It isn't over. And I like what you said. They always have something up their sleeve. So you can't presume that we're running away with it. We get careless, sloppy, do a victory celebration. It's still in flux.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about this because I think this is a topic that I find very fascinating, and I think you're kind of like uniquely like a perfect example of this. But so 2019, you got your YouTube channel taken, and then was that around the same time you got kicked off everything else, or was it like Twitter? Like when did you get kicked off of that? I know you ultimately got let back on, but like there was a period where you were gone.
I was banned from YouTube in February 2020, and then Twitter in July 21. Okay,
all right. So there's a real interesting dynamic to me, and I watch this happen with people who I know, people I'm friendly with. Like I knew Gavin McInnes, a good example of somebody who got canceled off everything and really hurt him, really sidelined him. Stefan Molyneux kicked off everything, really sidelined him. Like it's almost like they're not in the conversation anymore, at least the way that they were. Right. Milo, a great example of that, where he was really seemed like he was about to break through to mainstream success, and they squashed that. And somewhere along the years, it seemed like that started backfiring. I thought Andrew Tate, was an interesting example. I had never heard of Andrew Tate until he got canceled from everything, and then all of a sudden it was just like dominating the algorithm, and he was everywhere. And I think you were one of those guys too. So like even like you got back on Twitter, and I'm sure that helped, but you were already kind of surging before, I think, if I've got that correct. And so was there a period? So you're out there in the unpersoned world, and was there a time where you were like, oh, this is actually working here in this world? And like, what were you streaming on?
I was on Cozy TV, which is my own site.
Oh, you just made your own thing. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I was like, I haven't heard of that. But so that was, and did you start getting numbers there?
No, I was languishing. It was tough. I mean, the thing about deplatforming is it works. When I got banned from everything, I was not getting great numbers. It was when I got back on Rumble that I got on Rumble in the first place.
Rumble seems like it was a big deal in the set because they were the first one who really started doing numbers.
Yes. Yeah, and it was a live streaming platform. For a period I was banned from all live streaming platforms from roughly 21 until Rumble I think opened up live streaming to everybody, which maybe was like 2023, right around there. That was the wilderness. I literally could not stream my show unless I made a website, which is very costly and time consuming. And, what helped was being prolific and having like a core of supporters. Yeah. I do a show every day. There's a parasocial relationship. It's a cult-like following. But a lot of these guys, they either stop making content like Molyneux, they upload it to a platform that doesn't work. Like BitChute was pretty rough in the early days. And Gavin put all his stuff behind a paywall. And that's just, in my opinion, a bad business model. Because it's like you got to give out the free samples to get people to walk through the door. Right. And when it's to pay to get in, you don't get the conversion. You
don't get new listeners. Yeah.
Exactly. So I had a strategy where I said, I'm going to take a financial hit. Like I made no money for 2 years, but I knew it's like if I keep people coming through the door, eventually things will change or I can still make a little money if it's free and if it's good. And that's how I was able to just kind of like survive, but I'm still dependent on platform access.
Yeah, but it does. Okay, fair enough. But it does just seem like, like whatever, if the goal was to shut you up, well, that certainly didn't work out very well for them. And there does seem, I think there's just something interesting about the fact that it seems, at least like we were just saying, we're waiting for the other shoe to drop, but it seems at least for the time being that the cancel thing just stopped working and actually started like kind of injecting more life into the people who were getting canceled. Like I thought like obviously you're saying these years were rough, but on net, I think you may have benefited from that. And maybe I'm wrong, because maybe if you were just on YouTube and Twitter this whole time, you lost out on a lot from that. So like maybe I'm wrong about that, but at the very least, it seems to have not worked or something like that. And I thought Andrew Tate and Alex Jones too were like kind of examples of that, where it was just like, that's not, you didn't remove them from the conversation. They're more, like all three of you guys are more present than ever, whereas some of those other guys just like never kind of got back to where they were. I guess Gavin is back on Twitter now, I think. He
just last week, I think. Yeah, to me, it's more, in my opinion, a function of your strategy and just kind of, it seems that the people that have survived the longest are the people with a show. Only because if you have a show, people know when to tune in. It is every day, like Alex Jones does 3 hours every day. And he's on radio, which really helps, because I don't think he ever got censored from there. But I was never a believer in the Streisand effect thing, because it's like I can't process credit cards for my business. There's no Streisand effect where you can't make money, you can't have a bank account, and all that stuff. So it really, in my opinion, was Trump got banned from everything. And I think venture capital and private equity, they do what they do best, and they looked at him like an undervalued asset. And they came in and said, this guy's banned from everything. We can actually upset Silicon Valley and the market there if we make censorship-proof Rumble. It's like if I'm banned on Twitter, no one's going to build a new Twitter around me. But if Trump is banned on Twitter, you actually can build a Rumble, a True Social around him. And in a way, that explains to me 2024, because that is who came in. Little tech, it's Andreessen Horowitz, it's the Teal Club, it's Elon Musk. He was kind of like their guy, commercially and politically. And then I think the rising tide lifted all the boats. That's kind of how I interpret it, because we were headed towards like total annihilation of free speech. Like my listener base shrunk dramatically when I was in the wilderness.
Yeah, wasn't it wild seeing like everybody flip out about the FCC chairman threatening Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah,
there's free speech. Free speech is finally at risk in America after like the last 5 years. And you're like, really? Oh, really? Was this the one? Which, by the way, was a stupid thing for the FCC chair to say that. Totally, like, talk about seizing defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yes.
Like, here's okay, now you handed them a talking point. This guy is dying in the wilderness, This is a couple other things I want to talk about. I want to talk about censorship, and then I want to hit like Tucker, Candace, and some of that stuff. And but so there there's just been a lot of questions that are raised over the censorship stuff. And like I said, there's some areas that I struggle with myself, like how exactly I feel. I think I kind of landed about where you were on the Charlie Kirk thing. Like, look, like the government shouldn't be involved. They're not technically inciting violence, but like there really should be consequences for this. There should be some type of social consequences. And in fact, I'm a big believer in social consequences. But what do you think, like, in terms of, I think I heard you say something like, look, the right's in power now. When the left gets back in power, they're going to be censoring people. Mm-hmm. So maybe we should be doing things like that now. But like, what do you mean by that? Or what, like, do you think the FCC chair, I mean, you seem to agree with me when I said that, but like, should the FCC chairman be threatening Jimmy Kimmel and people like that?
No, I think that was just tactically dumb.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I do believe that we are in like a war, basically. We are in a race. And we know that because, like you said, under Biden, like, they were engaging in censorship. It was coming from the press office. It was coming from, I don't know how many departments and agencies, but it was quite a few of them that they were giving orders. Take this account, that post, take that down, the OSHA stuff. And they wasted no time in doing that. Like, Biden got in and it was just a whirlwind of J6, censorship, everything you can think of, a naked power grab. And I do believe that if Trump leaves office and a Democrat comes in, they're going to do it again. And so I'm a big believer that the right wing needs to really disempower the left institutionally. Like, if they were doing it under a different pretense, I would like what they're doing at Harvard and Columbia. The problem is they're doing it.
It's not on behalf of America.
Right. Yeah. For some other reason. But it's like, we should work to disorganize the left. We should work to go after their radicals, like Antifa. We should put the pressure on them hard. We should put the pressure on the far left. We should put the pressure on their funding mechanisms, their stuff, because if we lose, they will do it to us indiscriminately. They have no qualms about it. and they'll be more competent about it. And like, then they'll make the country the way they want it to be. So yeah, I'm a big believer in like, we should use the levers of power. I don't know about like censoring them on Twitter, let's say, but institutionally, yeah, we should be playing to win.
Yeah, I said on my show, and this is, from my particular strain of libertarianism or whatever, but I was like, I basically said the same thing as you. I was like, look, I don't view it as a free speech violation because like Jimmy Kimmel isn't a person anymore. Like you're part of the regime. Like once you, there is, and I know it's a bit of a gray area of where you draw the line when someone, I'm not going to say, hey, you pay your taxes, therefore you're part of the regime. But like, no, when you just become what Jimmy Kimmel is, you're no longer a citizen expressing their views. It just tactically, it was such a blunder. The guy's already done. We're killing him already. So like, what do we even do? Me and you get better numbers than these guys get. So like, why do we need to make them a free speech martyr? Like, it was just like shit. But I do think that, and it's one of the great disappointments of the Trump administration, is that, for all that talk about like Project 2025 and how he's going to be like permanently, he's going to overthrow democracy and all of this. It's like, okay, well, that was but there should have been like this time, like conservative and right-wing America should have been like, hey, we have to do something that like dismantles their mechanism. And I do think like, look, again, all of government's all of college is a government program. The whole thing's a government program. All of that. It's like, yeah, we should be shutting down as much of this stuff as we can. Just destroying it. So I don't really think, and maybe this is where me and you disagree, but I never believe that right-wingers are going to be able to capture and use these institutions. I think bureaucratic institutions are progressive by their very nature. They're egalitarian by their very nature. It's like, but you can smash a lot of it, or at least attempt. I mean, maybe you get struck down by the courts, but like at least try. There seems to be no attempt to even be like, how do we make sure this doesn't happen to our guys next time?
Right.
And in fact, I think part of that's because Trump doesn't really even view them as his guys.
Yeah.
Like, Donald Trump, I thought one of them, and you were there on January 6th, so curious to ask you a little bit about that. But I thought one of the most disgusting things I ever saw Donald Trump do was when he threw the January 6th guys under the bus.
Yes.
Like days after it, or maybe the day after it even. And okay, ultimately he pardoned them after letting them languish in prison for years. Okay, so you don't get like that much credit from me for that. But like, look, man, I never bought all the leftist claims about January 6th were always like hyperbolic insanity. Like it wasn't an insurrection, and Donald Trump didn't incite violence. But at the same time, if you're a leader and you told everybody that they just stole this election from me, like. And then you said you're going to go there, and then your people did what would be reasonable to do if the election was stolen from them, right? Like, it is not the claim, just like the Democrats were making the claim with Russia. It's like, well, then we should be nuking Moscow. Like, according to what you're saying, we should be at war with them now. Well, according to what you're saying, Donald Trump, you should storm the Capitol if that's the case. And so he kind of led his people into this. And then literally, because at the end of the day, it does seem that really what motivates Donald Trump is his own ego, his own greatness. And if they were like, oh, you're going to get impeached or removed, or you're going to get this if you don't go to, so he went, oh, okay, fine. And then threw his own people under the bus. I thought that was like disgusting.
Yeah, and he had the full power to pardon them in the first place.
Right there.
Could have done it. He had 3 weeks to do it, or 2 weeks, I guess is what it was. And yeah, at least for me, I was almost charged with conspiracy. They were considering charges against me. That was in the New York Times. And, and other people obviously did go to jail. And I was there because Trump told me to be, like Trump. And by that, I mean, I was going to be at the speech. I was not going to be at the Capitol building. The speech was at the Ellipse. Capitol was miles away. And Trump said, we are going to the Capitol to make our voices heard. I said, oh, well, Trump's going to be there. I guess it's cool. So I went there, and if I had been in jail, and other people were, is that not his fault? He saw no responsibility. And that is kind of his MO. I mean, he throws a lot of people under the bus. He is, I think, motivated by vanity. And here's the problem with that. If he's not in it to win it, then he's activating the enemy with no intention of following through.
That's right.
He got in office. He's like, oh, I won. So it's not that serious for him. And he can pardon himself when this is all over. And he's rich, so he can go. But if the country turns upside down, we're all going to be paying the price. And so that was my big beef with him, among others, in 24, is like, look, you guys don't understand. He did not learn his lesson. He never does. He hasn't changed at all. If anything, he's just more tired and cares less. And as a consequence, it's going to be just as inefficient as the first term, in which case we shouldn't even bother. In which case we're better off not poking the bear. Let's just let Kamala catch the hot potato and forget about it, because he's going to start something he can't finish. That was kind of my problem.
Yeah, it's in a weird way, it's kind of true about the people who stormed the Capitol building too. Like, you're like, yo, I don't think you realize what you're doing. I know you think this is funny. Like, I know you think it's funny. Oh, you fart on Nancy Pelosi's desk? That's really funny. Hey, you know what government is? It's not your friend. You know what I mean? Like, these are the biggest, most powerful gangsters in all of the land. And like, they're going to crush you and lose no sleep over it. And, you know, I was, like I said before, like I voted for Trump in 24. I didn't vote for him in 2016, but I was rooting for, like, it couldn't help. But I mean, like, the 2016 election day coverage will forever go down as just like the greatest thing ever. Like the montages of MSNBC and the Young Turks and all this stuff was like, but I guess I'm friends with the Young Turks now because we're all against the genocide or whatever. But like at the time, it was just like so amazing. 2020, I wasn't even rooting for him because I really did feel exactly that. Especially, I was just so furious at him for the year that was 2020. I mean, like, talk about just like, my God, what a failure. Like, in the moment of your life, you were in the seat of power and failed so hard. And just, you know, instituted totalitarianism in the United States of America is like the craziest shit ever. And I did feel exactly like you felt, which if people can remember back, I mean, 2020 was such a crazy year with the mass riots in the streets and the censorship and the lockdowns and all of this. And I was just kind of like, what do we get for this?
Right.
Like, it's okay. Like, we're kicking a hornet's nest and without a plan associated with it, like for top marginal tax cuts or something like that. Like, what is and it just seems like, which you get from Dick Cheney anyway, you know, like, so it did just feel like that. And I think that's a really wise observation that, like, you never want to, you know, like, it's the same way I feel about January 6th. Like, what are you doing? Are you overthrowing the U.S. government right now? Because if you are, you better fucking be prepared to do that, you know? Like, it is not wise to do that. Oh, you're just doing it with no strategy. Oh, we'll just take selfies inside. Like, okay, all right. I don't think you guys actually realize what you're dealing with. And I think particularly in the United States of America, where we have this kind of, you know, we're a very, very wealthy country, and we have an enormous, powerful government, the most powerful government in the history of the world. But generally speaking, like, if you don't cross them, they're fairly polite to you. You know what I mean? Like, they're not like, it's like, hey, you get your taxes in. Like, listen, we're taking half your money. You have that in on time to us. But as long as you do that within reason, you know, you can kind of, and people get very comfortable and kind of like are a bit removed from what the real nature of government is. And you don't understand that it's like, look, man, like, John Brennan might seem fine when he's on TV, but you cross that motherfucker and he will kill you and not lose a wink of sleep over it. Like, these are people who will launch wars on false pretenses. These are people who will back both sides of a war and just let the killing happen, you know? And man, you really want to be careful about crossing them. Okay, so the January 6th stuff is where these accusations of you being a Fed have come from, which, you know, full transparency here, I do not believe that you're a Fed. I don't fucking know. Who the hell knows? Everybody, you're a Fed. Everyone's a Fed. Right. I don't know who's the Fed and who's not a Fed. But I know that this was something that, you know, Tucker had said, and I think you were very upset by this, and understandably so. I think that's it's a particular type of accusation that is, it's a very frustrating one, I think, in a way, because it's kind of like, oh, you're just, everything you said is undermined now, right? Like, I don't have to deal with anything. And I think that, you know, anyway, I understand why that upset you a lot. But I think from what I've heard, a lot of this comes from the January 6th stuff, and the accusation is that you were encouraging people to go into the Capitol. So what's the deal with all that?
Well, it even goes back to something else, which is the Joe Kent story, which I brought up before, because, you know, I was at January 6th, and at January 6th, I got up there and I gave a speech. And in the speech, I gave speeches at all these events, by the way. I went to the Atlanta State Capitol, Harrisburg, Phoenix, Lansing, and even D.C. And I gave speeches at Governor's Mansion, state capitals in D.C. before. And J6, you know, we thought it was going to be the speech on the ellipse, and then we were going to maybe do something at the actual Capitol building, although I wasn't going to be there. But there were plans for there to be stages there. And, you know, so like I said, I went to the speech. Trump said, go to the thing. We went to the thing, and somebody said, you got to give a speech. So I said, okay, find me a megaphone. I get a megaphone. I jump up on a thing. And we're like 500 feet from the Capitol. We're not even near the building. We're like on the street next to the lawn. And in the speech, I said, well, we're taking the Capitol back, keep moving, take down the barriers. And then we left. We didn't go in. I wasn't even close to the building. And this video had been out there for a long time. And people knew I was there and didn't get charged. I got my money frozen, although I wasn't public about that. I got on the no-fly list. I went public with that, went public with the money later. There was never an accusation until like about a year later. And then people started to create this story that, that I was leading people in and I didn't get charged. Now, where it started with Tucker is with Joe Kent. Because now, like 2 years later, I make potentially Joe Kent lose the election. And Joe Kent was a close friend of Tucker's.
Right.
Joe Kent is in the CIA. And that is how we attacked him. We attacked him on that basis. And of course, it was in self-defense. He said that he disavowed me, condemns all my views, we're keeping you out. And I looked at him as very threatening because like we talked about before, he's kind of boxing me out intentionally. So we made him lose. And it was a couple months after this is where I first got the inkling of it, Michelle Malkin, who's a good friend of mine.
I know Michelle. I've had her on the show before. She's great.
She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she's married to a Jewish guy, so you can't be mad at her.
Look at that. Good woman.
And he's great too, actually. He's pretty based himself. But so she communicates to me through a mutual friend that she gets this really weird call from Tucker. She says that Tucker never calls her. Sometimes she texts him and he'll give her thumbs up, but they don't really talk. She says, but he calls her out of the blue asking about me and asking about Kanye. Did Nick make Kanye go crazy? Did Nick try to take Trump out at the Kanye dinner?
I don't think anyone can hold you responsible for that.
You can blame me for a lot, but that's
no, this one rests squarely on the shoulders of Pete Davidson. And we all know that. We all know that. You get your family stolen by Pete Davidson, you're going to lash out at the world.
You're going to get radicalized. Yeah. But so he's calling her asking about all this stuff and about J6th. And she said it was very strange. Like it felt like he was reading from a script. He was asking these questions. And she just told me to be on alert. Then I get a call from Anya Parampil, the wife of Max Blumenthal at Gray Zone. They're doing a piece about me. And she asked me about the Capitol. And I tell her the story. I said, I was 500 feet away. I testified. I got subpoenaed by Congress. I said, I testified under oath. I did not talk to law enforcement. She publishes this 3-part hit piece about me saying that I'm basically what Tucker said, that I'm here to make America first look bad, that I'm a Fed, that I made Joe Kent lose. The only reason I made Joe Kent lose is because I'm a Fed trying to whatever. And so I do a big stream reviewing the hit piece and debunking basically the whole thing. Then I get a call from Bryson Gray, the MAGA rapper. Now he's a Christian rapper. He's working for a company called Influenceable, which they pay influencers to push social media campaigns. He goes, my wife just got a new campaign from Influenceable. They're paying people money to post the link to this article with the hashtag FedFuentes. And there's like a whole spreadsheet. It said, or a whole like readout. It said the campaign is Fed Fuentes. Post the link to this article and say these things, and you get paid. And someone posted it. This like state representative in New York. I forget his name a long time ago, but he was the only one who had posted it. I put them on blast. Influenceable calls me up. Please stop talking about us. We will take it down. We promise. Everyone's trying to broker this big truce. Huh. That's how, because I was pro Tucker. I was a big fan up until that point. And I said, So clearly, because him and Blumenthal are tight, he was fishing because he knew Michelle for this story. Blumenthal's wife wrote it. And that was like a coordinated hit job in retaliation for their buddy, Joe Kent, who lost. And anyway, so that's kind of where the rivalry started. And by the way, I know for a fact that at a recent dinner, Tucker, even before he talked shit about me in July, he was pushing that script to anyone who would listen, to other e-celebrities, to students, saying, yeah, Nick is this gay kid, he's trans, and he's a Fed, and he's here to make us look bad. So this was in private, and he was kind of suggesting that on a show, and then he explicitly said it this summer.
Well, I guess he implied it with me, because I heard people on Twitter saying this. So it was, you know, like, which I think I don't remember exactly the details of this, but I think you had said something that pissed me off. Not that, whatever, it's water under the bridge, but I think you had said something that pissed me off, and so I just didn't respond to it. And just like the way people were coming at me was like a little disrespectful. So I was like, "Fuck you, I don't have to answer this." But he said when I was on the show something like we were talking about Ray Epps. And then he was like, "There's someone else who was on camera and he kind of put the words in my mouth. He went, "As I'm sure you know."
Yeah.
And I did not even pick up on that until like people were showing me the clip of it. And I certainly never thought he was talking about you. And he never said anything to me about that. But then, of course, right, I did see with Candace where he did explicitly say it. And I think, you know, I guess maybe the thing about it is that it does seem, just on the surface of it, and I'm not accusing you of being a Fed at all. Like, I don't think you're a Fed. But I guess just on the surface of if there's a video of you advocating people go into the Capitol and the way they were just getting everybody, and it does seem like, although you're obviously a lot bigger now than you were then, you still would have been a pretty nice scalp to be on their mantle. You know what I mean? Like, it would just be like, oh, wouldn't they go at you for that and try to find some charge or something like that? But is it the case that there's just nothing to charge you with, or what?
There was nothing to charge me with. I mean, they looked at charging me, but I didn't trespass. I wasn't violent. And
wouldn't that be inciting?
Yeah,
something?
but my lawyer told me I'm protected by the First Amendment for that, because it wasn't like the language was such that it wouldn't be. And also, no one else got charged with incitement. The charges were trespassing, conspiracy, all things that didn't apply to me.
Right. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah, I think maybe, you know, it's like and I think maybe this is partially why you get that rap, which I think is unfair. It's unfair to call people Feds, you know, unless you really have fucking detailed, like, I have the evidence and I'm willing to show it. It's just like, it's an unfair accusation. I think, like, you know, when Ray Epps, well, by the way, do you think he was a Fed?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm skeptical, but it's possible.
Yeah, I lean toward thinking he was. It's just the way the Democrats were defending him seemed so bizarre to me. But anyway. So, like, there's that famous video I'm sure you've seen, everyone's seen, where Ray Epps is in the crowd and he starts saying, "We're going to storm the Capitol." And everyone immediately around him starts screaming Fed. Now, in that moment, they have no way of knowing that he's a Fed. But it's just like, dude, that's what Feds do. That's what Feds do. They come in here and do this. And I think the reason why you might get some of that is because, in the same sense, I think there's a certain feeling of like when people are opposing Israel and opposing the warfare state, and then someone else goes over and is like, "No, and we got to attach that to Nazi shit," or something like that. Not that you literally say that. I'm using these terms loosely. But like there's a feeling of almost like that. Like just like with Ray Epps going, "Hey, come on, man. That's what they're trying to cast us as, not as this." And I think the other thing, and I want to preface this because I really do, I am not, look, I'm 15 years your senior and I do the same shit too. So I'm not like, you know, I had, there was one with Dave Rubin recently where Dave Rubin was just talking shit about me on some shit. Like it was, I don't know why my name came up. Someone asked him a question and mentioned me. And then he goes, "I think Dave Smith's a moron who doesn't know what he's talking about," and blah, blah, blah. And so I just publicly challenged him to a debate. Now, truth be told, I don't really want to debate Dave Rubin. Who the fuck wants to, like, what is this even? But it's just like, I don't know, we're in this game, and like, what do you do when someone who has millions of followers is saying, "I'm a moron and I don't know what I'm talking about"? You're weaponizing your audience against me, and I only have one tool in my toolkit, which is I'll debate you. I can't fist fight you, you know? Like, so it's like, okay, so let's have a debate and we'll see who's a fucking moron. And now I weaponize the audience back against you, and and he accepted but then refused to ever, you know, he's like, a bunch of people have reached out. Patrick Bet-David tried to set it up. Charlie Kirk actually tried to set it up. Charlie Kirk wanted me to come debate, and I said, "How about Dave Rubin?" Because I know he lives in Florida, and it was right when we were talking our shit. And then he was like, "No answer from him." Like, both of them. But so like, I get, like, if someone attacks you feel the need to attack them back. It's kind of the game we're in. I do think though, when you're, you know, it leads easy to the perception when you're kind of attacking me, attacking Tucker, attacking Candace, you go, well, what purpose are you really serving here? You know what I'm saying? And it's like, it seems like any voice that's critical of Israel, you know what I'm saying? Like you're going after, and then it does make people say like, do you get the point I'm making? It goes like, okay, so what, number one, you're saying we got to attach all this toxic baggage to our opposition of Israel. And then number two, anytime there's a critic of Israel who's resonating, it seems like you're trying to take him down a peg. You get what I'm saying?
I do, and from the outside looking in, I get it. But I would say that with Tucker, it started before all that. It started before he was ever criticizing Israel. This was in 2023, at the beginning of 2023, before October 7th. And,
Right.
and, you know, Tucker never said anything negative about Israel up to that point, with the exception of one thing he did about the ADL. And, you know, same thing with Candace. I mean, I supported Candace like I supported Tucker to the hilt. I had an account called Standis Owens. I stan Candace Owens. And we were like gassing her up during the whole thing. And all I ever said about Candace is that it felt like she was kind of blowing smoke up my ass about why she wouldn't do the show with me. And I didn't like that, you know, after she gets all this clout, she's clouded up, she then starts saying it's the Frankists. It's the Frankist. And I said, yeah, that's not true. Like, that's nonsense. And even this year, she invites me on her show, and I ask her, I said, well, is it going to be a hit piece? She goes, no, I don't set anybody up. I get all dressed up. I fly down there, look into, you know, she extended the olive branch, I accept. And she's motherfucking me about drama from a year ago, about you, about are you racist? Are you anti-Semitic? Why aren't you married? All this kind of stuff. It wasn't a friendly interview. I don't even think it was cordial. I think it was basically, it was an attempted hit job. And, you know, so like with you, I mean, look, we have disagreements and here we are talking about them. And I think I said during my show, like, I like you and I respect you, but I also speak freely. And if I disagree, I say something. And, you know, these other people got to recognize, like Tucker and Candace, they're more powerful than me. They have institutional backing. Tucker is from Fox. Candace is from Daily Wire. They never got censored from anything. Me, I never had any. They tried to throttle me in the crib. By they, I mean conservatives, from the time I was 18. And I've been banned from most things for 5 years. So it just, to me, it's like a little unfair. It's like when Ben Shapiro quote tweeted me with 1,000 followers. For Tucker,
well, that's something else. I mean,
but I think it's similar. I mean, Tucker and Candace getting together and saying, oh, this guy's like a fed. It's like, yeah, well, you guys have millions and millions of followers that you accumulated serving the system that I was getting killed by for 5 years. So that's why I feel like I have a special license to attack, because it's punching up. But, you know, I don't know what to make of Tucker and Candace. I would say, if I was being charitable, that there's immense distrust on both sides.
Yeah.
And for obvious reasons, because I'm an unknown quantity on the outside who, you know, they probably don't watch everything. They don't know what's happening down here. And on the other side, they are exiting the institutions. So from someone on the outside, it's like, are you CIA? Where are your loyalties? What do you really believe? Are you concealing what you really believe? And to what extent? And so, you know, I guess when I gave Tucker a black eye, so to speak, and kind of retaliated very strongly, maybe at the minimum, it made him just kind of respect what I represent. But I'm open to all possibilities, making up with either of them.
Well, that's good. I think it's good to be open to that. You know, I remember like that, and I don't know that this is true, right? Like, I don't know if David Duke is a Fed. I've never met David Duke. I don't know him. But I remember he used, in 2008 and 2012, he came out and endorsed Ron Paul for president. And then this was, of course, used against Ron Paul. And I remember I remember going, oh, you're a fucking Fed. Because, like, if you're not a Fed, then fucking don't endorse Ron Paul. Like, what are you doing? Do you hate him? Like, this would only make sense, like, if you, and so I think there's just something, and I'm saying, like, from the perspective of Tucker Carlson, who is in a different generation and a different time and a different, I think there might be something of that where it's like, dude, this looks, you know what I'm saying? Like, to me, like that. I also think, and this is something I've struggled with myself, maybe like a little bit of imposter syndrome or something, or just the fact that guys like me and you, it's a little bit weird when you're kind of like, you know, like you're grinding and you're doing your job. You're doing what you do. We do shows. And then like you kind of look up all of a sudden and you're like, oh, I'm like kind of up here in this. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of like people who are doing shows who aren't like, and I think that, you know, like I had this when I was debating Alex Berenson, who just is fucking horrible. And I probably never should have done that. I got sucked at this. I'm embarrassed by it, you know. But I mean, you know, whatever. It's just, it's like the same thing I think you have sometimes. Like, whereas like, there's got to be a price tag to this. Like, you can't be allowed to just shit talk me like this,
Right.
you know, like, especially when, and for whatever reason, maybe there's something about me, my personality, but I'm much more offended by someone calling me a Holocaust denier than I am by someone being a Holocaust denier, if that makes sense. because it's just like a fucking dirty trick to try to
Yes.
get me with. And there is, I mean, we didn't get it. We could talk a little about the Holocaust if you want before we end, but like there isn't like, I do believe the Holocaust happened. I do have family who's suffered in it. I also, like I said before, don't believe that should be like, that suffering should be imposed on everybody else. And I don't think it makes sense that everyone ought to be going to our museum or something. Like I find that to be weird. But to claim that I'm denying that is like a real fucked up thing. And in my mind, I was like, you work for the New York Times, dude. You pinned this to your Twitter, like this accusation of me. But then I kind of noticed as we were debating that like in my mind, I'm like, dude, you're the fucking New York Times guy. I'm some comedian.
Right.
And he's like, dude, you're Dave Smith. I'm just Alex Berenson. Like he kind of had that.
Yeah.
Like he didn't exactly say that, but I almost started to realize that it's like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of gotta like recalibrate in a way. And I would just suggest, just humbly suggest that like, while you view it as like Tucker and Candace are up here and I'm just this guy down here, even the guys at the top, as I've gotten to meet them, they're also just people. And they also just like, even that when you're talking shit on your live stream, you're like, I don't know, I'm a fucking kid in my basement talking shit on my live stream. But actually, like, maybe they heard some of that shit, you know, and like, actually, and they look at it much more of like a parody relationship. Like, I know, like, I just know that you, and I don't, this is nothing that Tucker ever told me. I'm literally just speculating. But like, you went at Tucker pretty hard. I remember after the 2020 election.
Yeah.
When he was basically saying, I have not seen any evidence that this thing was stolen. And to be fair, like, you know, you went at him in a pretty harsh way. And so I'm just saying, things like that, like I think guys like me and you often feel like, well, who the fuck am I? I'm just some guy talking shit. Whereas like people see more than you think, and they are aware of it.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Well, and I get that, but with Tucker in particular, the Fed, if he came out and said, I don't like that kid, that's different than saying he's a Fed.
Agreed.
And he said, I know that. And it's like, but I'm me, and I know that's not true. How can you know something that's not true? Like, and people don't have to believe me, but I know what I know, and Tucker knows what he knows. And
I've been accused of being a Fed by several people, that I'm here to ruin libertarianism and here to do all this. It's an amusement. And of course, I've been accused of being on Qatar's payroll,
Yes.
which is like, when do they start sending the money? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm doing
Is it in the
everything.
mail?
Like, I mean, come on, guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I get, look, and obviously that's license for you to respond, more than license for you to respond. So I understand that. I couldn't, like, obviously I love Tucker and I love Candace. They've just both been very good to me, but I could never tell you like, oh, you shouldn't go back at that. And in
Right.
fact, as I was watching it, I was like, well, Nick Fuentes is gonna go to work here, because also like that's kind of, you know, you're brawling with a brawler if you try to do that. And so obviously I understand that was going to be the response. I guess from my perspective, because like even what you're saying with Candace, with the Frankists and stuff, like, you know, or the Brigitte Macron stuff, you know, like with a lot of this stuff, I try to be somewhat fair. Like, I try not just to dismiss a conspiracy because it sounds crazy, because like, hey, I know there's lots of crazy conspiracies that are in fact true, but at the same time, like I said to you before, it's like, I'm just always 10 books behind. I'm always, there's people I love reading them who have just put out books and I still haven't gotten to. Like, I still haven't read Jim Bovar's new book, and I want to, but it's just so much shit to fuck around. And you're like, I can't even follow you down this conspiracy rabbit hole to debunk it. You know what I mean? Like, I just can't. But I would say that, you know, me personally, I would have rather Candace was just the chick who worked at Daily Wire and was like, I cannot support the slaughter of innocent people. Like, I loved that she was like, I just had a baby and I'm sorry, I'm not going to support this shit. I thought it was so, and to have a Daily Wire employee take that stance at the Daily Wire, and then to find out that in fact feelings do care about your facts, you know, and that she got, like, I just thought that was so valuable. And Tucker Carlson, to me, I mean, and I think you could appreciate this too, right? If you just like remove yourself from it in your personal issue, it's like, dude, our Bill O'Reilly is Tucker Carlson. That is so fucking awesome. Like, that is so much better than having Bill O'Reilly. You know what I mean? And so like, and I think you would grant that, like, that's fucking awesome. Like, it is, they are important voices. So I would just hope you would kind of, like all of us have to do to some degree, is like try our best to remove our own personal thing. Like, you slighted me, and go, look, what are we trying to do here? I certainly think, as I was saying with the Jordan Peterson thing before, and I said this on a podcast at Ron Paul's birthday party, someone was interviewing me, Clint Russell was asking me about this. And I said, like, about you, I was like, look, Douglas Murray might think I shouldn't be on big shows. And like other people might think you shouldn't be on big shows. But you know what? You're here. Like there's no more debate about this, Douglas Murray. It's like, yeah, I'm as big as you without the institutional background. So you don't get to say I don't get to be here. And I think the same thing is true with you and the Groypers. It's like nobody's being vanquished. We're all here. And in fact, what needs to happen is not vanquishing people, but incorporating. And I think that Tucker and Candace and people like that. Like, I just think all these voices are so important. And you know what I mean? I hope you would like kind of think about that.
And I do. And I grant that on my show even throughout these feuds, I've said they're both important and they're pushing people in the right direction. But I think it's totally the opposite. I think that, you know, like with Candace in particular, she brought me out under false pretenses and then tried to vanquish me. I think that's what that was, or that was a way of putting me down or something, because I had just had my biggest show ever in the middle of the war. She invites me out the next day, and her whole show is, you hate Jews for being Jewish. You're a real racist. And it wasn't friendly. It was nasty. She was nasty to me. And then afterwards, she wouldn't let it go. It didn't play well at all, because in the interview, she goes, well, you got triggered. I said, I don't think so. She goes, well, people are going to, and nobody agreed. People were furious about the paywall. They're pissed at the way she treated me. It was universally negative, and she wouldn't let it go. And then she got to come in and say, well, you lied. The reason people didn't like it is because you lied about it. And it's like, lady, you know, you got to take the L. You were out of pocket. It didn't work. It backfired. So I could coexist with her. I was willing to do it before. I'd even be willing to do it now. And the same is true with Tucker. And I think Tucker's more rational. Maybe he's a guy or something. Or I don't know why.
It does help.
It helps, you know. But I could coexist with Tucker. It's just there needs to be a mutual understanding, because I also represent a lot of people, and when they put me down, they're not just putting me down, they're putting down that whole right-wing flank of the issue. And I don't need everybody to agree with me. We can I love the disagreement. Sure. I love this conversation, and we disagreed about some things here too. It's just when people say, you're a fed, you're a racist, F you shouldn't be allowed on the shows, you're just an asshole. It's like, I'm not an asshole. I've been fighting for 10 years to say the stuff that many of these people just got around to saying last year. And that's just, so yeah, it's like a little irritating when they do that to me, but I'm willing to be the bigger person.
Well, it's good. Well, look, I mean, I think it's good. Look, dude, I mean, all of us are trying to, figure out kind of, now that we're in this position, like how exactly to manage that. And I think, like, kind of as we were talking about before, it's like we're united in our opposition to a thing, but now we have in a lot of ways. Look, it's been decentralized, so it's not like any one of us is exactly like the mainstream guy, but like we're the mainstream media now. You know, like it's us. It's like, I mean, honestly, like there's particularly like daytime shows, like you're lapping. It's like me too. You know, so it's an interesting thing. All right, so maybe we could talk about this a little bit and really test my YouTube channel. Because I think a lot of this, I remember when we first spoke, or one of the podcasts when we first spoke, the big controversy about you, that at least from what I heard from the other libertarians or whatever the world, was that you're a Holocaust denier, and that there was the cookie. There's a clip where like a fan makes the Cookie Monster joke, and then you like read it, like obviously laughing around and joking. I remember people sending me this and going, "This is clearly like he's joking around, at least to some degree." But then when you were criticizing me, you were talking about like me not, because my family was involved, not willing to challenge. What is your view simply like what we were saying before, that it's like, look, this happened, it was awful, but like also all of history doesn't have to revolve around this. Also, it was in the context of a war where like 50 million people died and Europe was destroyed, so like that. Or are you actually saying like, this didn't happen, the numbers are not, because this now is much with the general, whatever you want to call it. I hate using the word anti-Semitism because it's not even a good word, but with the general kind of like hostility toward Jewish people, this does seem to be something that's like really catching fire, and I just think is completely wrong. Like, I think it's like Israel killed Charlie Kirk. It's like, this just isn't actually right. It's not actually good history. And so anyway, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Well, and I also, by the way, sorry, I'll let you go, but I also do recognize, I remember thinking this the last time I had you on, there's like this weird dynamic. I guess I feel a little freer now. But back then, I kind of wanted to ask you about it. But then I also realized that if you don't, you can't even say it because we'll all get fucking nuked. So it's like a weird conversation to have. But I am curious.
For me, it was never really about the Holocaust in itself, because early on, I watched a lot of documentaries, like the canon of Holocaust denial documentaries and essays, and I found a lot of the arguments compelling. And then I saw that other people were pushing back on that. And I have good friends of mine who are like, they're fellow travelers, let's say, and they adamantly insist it did happen. And they send me blog posts and things.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you sit down and say, so is this really about World War II historicity debate or historiographical debate? And to me, I'm sort of missing the point. To me, the Holocaust is just like, it is just a central part of the Jewish identity story, which is that if the white people get too much power, they're going to kill us all. And that means if we don't have enough power, they're going to kill us all. If they can critique us, they're going to kill us all. It's wrapped up, and this has been pointed out before, that more Jewish people think that the Holocaust is central to their identity than believe that believing in God is central to their identity. And that just tells you about what Jewish identity really is and how it's political. And so to me, what matters more, I don't know. I think it was exaggerated. I think it was embellished. I don't know that 6 million exactly died, but I don't know. I'm not an expert, and I don't really even care about being an expert. To me, it's more about, like you said, I don't want this trauma imposed on me and for it to define our political order, because that's really the issue.
Well, that part I think is 100% reasonable. Mm-hmm. And in fact, as you said, that the Holocaust is more central to Jewish identity than God. It's certainly true for non-religious Jews, and even maybe for some religious Jews. Like it is very central to Jewish identity, and I think in unhealthy ways. And I think absolutely you're right about this being kind of this. It's I love when Darryl Cooper made this point, but it was such a perfect way to put it. But where he was like, look, the founding fathers are Martin Luther King, and you know what I mean? Like it's not like, and he goes, you could test that out. Like go desecrate a statue of George Washington, and then go desecrate a statue of Martin Luther King, and see what has more of the reaction. And it is like, it's really like World War II and the civil rights movement have become like the American consciousness, and I think the Holocaust and World War II being the same for Jews. And of course, the story becomes this very ahistorical, weird version of it where it's like the creation of Israel stopped the Holocaust or something like that, which is like just not at all true. In fact, they had very similar goals, the Zionists and the Nazis at first, which is why the Zionists wanted to do business with them. I think it was the Nazis' anti-Semitism is the only reason why that didn't happen. But I do think it's like, and I've been down this rabbit hole a bit, but it's like, I really don't actually think it's that exaggerated. I mean, it's probably not 6 million to the person, but like, I think even David Irving, I think he put it between 4 and 5, like, and that was like on the low end estimate. Mm-hmm. And even as 4 or 5, it's like, what are we even fucking talking about here? It's all the same thing. So I think like, and I guess in a way, because we've gone for a while now, so we could wrap up unless there's anything that you wanted to bring up. But I will say I appreciate that. I think, and this isn't, I'm not even saying like, because I'm sure the part of the problem with this stuff, right, is that, at least from my perspective, is that when you're Jewish, there is this kind of, not amongst you, I don't think, but I think maybe some of your fans, not all of them, where there's this kind of heads you lose, tails I win type thing where it's like, okay, so like if there's a Jew who's for Israel, they go, well, of course, that's all the Jews. And then if there's a Jew who's against Israel, it's like, well, they always control both sides of the, you know what I mean? So it's like, no matter what you do, you're like kind of in this position where you're like, well, there's nothing I could say here other than, yes, you should hate Jews. And then they'll be like, okay, finally a good one or whatever. But I do think that like we said before, we're all kind of like figuring out this new world. Mm-hmm. We're all kind of like dealing with our newfound relevance. You're also, like, how old are you?
27.
27. So you're kind of like, you're approaching your late 20s and where it's at. And I do really appreciate you kind of like I really appreciated on Patrick Bet David when you said like, that you're like, I'm not a racialist, I'm a Christian. And that it's like, and that not that you might have some racialist views, but like that being a Christian is first and foremost like the most important part of your identity. I would just really encourage that. I think like that's what we need. I really think that's like, I told you when we spoke on the phone when we first planned this, and I told you the video that I saw of you was like a clip that was going super viral, which I think were touching on earlier today, where you were just like, where you were talking about how like a Christian just can't support killing people like this. And you were, and you even said, you were like, look, I don't want them living here, but like that we also can't support killing them over there. And I just thought there was something really powerful about that. It's like kind of, because it's a paradigm shattering thing where someone would look at this and go like, wait, but I've been led to believe this is like the most horrible person. And he's the one who cares about this. And I kind of think, like, I would just hope that that's in, you know what I mean? Like that you continue kind of to push that and all that stuff. I'll say I really, really appreciate you coming out and traveling for this. I know it took us, it's hard. We're both busy. And so it's hard to schedule these things. Really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we do it again soon.
Me too. Absolutely. And thanks for having me. And I will say, just to kind of close it off, you know, what I love honesty. I like people that care about the country. I love people. And I think as long as that's the agreement, there won't be war. You know, there won't be violence, and we can talk and we can get along. And that's really what it's about. So I enjoyed the conversation as well. So I'd be happy to do it again.
All right.
Maybe on my show.
Oh, sure thing. All right. Everybody, thank you for listening. Catch you next time.